So everyone, thank you so much for joining. 355 people. Wow, brilliant. So as I was saying earlier, it was, of course, very difficult to choose all of these passages. So I hope you're all satisfied with them. I'll be very brief because I did mention this a bit in my talk earlier today, but just to give you a sense of these images of Shakespeare, that this painting from the 1600s is one of the most clearly identifiable as what Shakespeare may have looked like, taken from his first folio published in...
About the earring. So someone asked about the earring.
About the earring? I don't know why he had an earring. I'm sorry about that. I know that it was a certain fashion at the time, but yeah. So I wanted to start with Hamlet, written in about 1600. So this is one of the most quoted, most performed, one of his most famous plays, tragedies. The character of Hamlet was, okay, so sorry, I wanted to say a bit about the performance history before I started talking about it. Hamlet was first performed in an area of north of the city of London. This is the ancient medieval city of London, in an area called Shoreditch up here, at a theatre called The Theatre, very imaginatively. This is the site of it today in the north of London. So if you do ever go there, you can imagine these words echoing out from history from that point. So Hamlet is set in Denmark, and the basic story is of the son of a king whose uncle usurps the throne, kills the king, and often then marries the wife, the widow of the king, as in with Hamlet. And it's the son's attempt, so Hamlet's attempt, to get justice upon the king. But it's a very interesting take on this because it does various things quite differently, and it challenges the norms of theatre and performance at the time. The role was first written for Richard Burbage, who was the owner, the manager of the Lord Chamberlain's Men, where Shakespeare was a part and was the writer. Shakespeare also would have performed in Hamlet. It's not known what role he had. One of the things that was different in Hamlet than other tragedies in the past and performances in the past was the role of the character. So this character here, Aristotle, this ancient philosopher from the 300s BC, in his work, The Poetics, he said that in order to continue a plot, for a plot to go from beginning to end, the character had to have good, sound morals, and that there should be a kind of natural, good progression through the plot. So everything is in a way quite clear, cut and dried. But what Shakespeare does in Hamlet is it's much more internal. It's not just as simple as the son is purely vengeful of his father and then takes revenge. There's much more nuance, there's much more doubt, there's much more of an internal dialogue. It's in a way much more real as to how a crime is committed or to how we want to live our lives, how we think justice should be done, and how we wrestle with this sense of justice. What's right? What's wrong, actually? And these were things that were, in Aristotle's words, meant to be very cut and dried. And actually, in a lot of Shakespeare's plays, they were tweaked later on in history. For example, King Lear, as we'll get to a bit later, they refused to perform it 100 years after Shakespeare's death. They refused to continue with the same ending, this very sad, meaningless ending that the King Lear has. They changed it where it's a happier ending. They couldn't stand the fact that there might be this unanswered question, paradox of the right and the wrong, and a more subjective, meaningless universe. You know, if everything is subjective, then there's no ultimate truth. There's just what people are doing, and they're doing it the best or the worst that they can. So this was quite difficult for people to deal with in later centuries. And Hamlet is one of the reasons why this has been so constantly discussed, because it leaves so many questions and so many motives unanswered. So the first quote is from Act 3, Scene 1, which is this very famous monologue by Hamlet, where he is debating with himself about whether or not to do something about his father who's been killed, and this new king, Claudius, is sleeping with Hamlet's mother, and Hamlet's obviously very upset about this. And this is his take on the nature of action and the nature of right and wrong. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them, to die, to sleep, no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of disprized love, the law's delay, the influence, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might his quietus make with a bare bodkin? Who would fardels bear to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country, from whose bourne no traveller returns, puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sickled o'er with the pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pitch and moment with disregard their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. I like these old photos of Shakespearean actors, and this is a Victorian actor playing Hamlet in the late 1800s. So I would love to go into all of these speeches and dialogues in more detail, but for time, I'll be quite scant in my coverage, but hopefully enough meat that you can get an idea of what they're about. So in Act 5, Hamlet goes to a graveyard and he starts chatting with gravediggers who are actually preparing the grave of Ophelia. Hamlet doesn't know this yet and finds this out later. The whole famous image of Hamlet holding a skull in his hand and talking to the skull, this scene is from here in Act 5, Scene 1. That is not the to be or not to be. It may be seen as that, but that's not what he's doing in the to be or not to be scene at all. The holding the skull is in this scene here. And I chose it because although Hamlet is a tragedy, and all of the other tragedies called tragedies are tragedies, there's a lot of humor often in many of them. And often it's quite a dark, subversive, nihilistic humor, which I really like and I think is very intuitive of Shakespeare because it adds a lot more depth to the characters. In fact, it doesn't make it as, again, as cut and dried as they're good, they're evil, they're confused, they're sane, they're mad, they're in their wits. There's this interesting human ground to a lot of his characters. And I really like this scene with Hamlet. One of the funniest images I found while researching it was a reference to it in Star Wars, where Chewbacca is holding C-3PO's head in the same moment from this scene. So this is where Hamlet sees the skull of someone else in the graveyard. He sees a skull and he wonders about whether it could be a lawyer's. And he's like, well, what is that lawyer now? He's just a dead man now. Where are all his airs and graces? And then later he digs up, the gravedigger gives him another skull, which is the skull of a jester that used to entertain Hamlet as a child. So it's a brilliant discourse on mortality and the nature, the futility potentially of life when, or the perspective of one's life when death is the inevitable outcome for us all. And that's all that left of us is a skeleton. So I really love this scene. There's another. Why may not that be the skull of a lawyer? Where be his quiddities now, his quillets, his cases, his tenures, and his tricks? Why does he suffer this rude knave now to knock him about the sconce with a dirty shovel, and will not tell him of his action of battery? This fellow might be in his time a great buyer of land, with his statutes, his recognizances, his fines, his double vouchers, his recoveries. Is this the fine of his fines and the recovery of his recoveries, to have his fine pate full of fine dirt? Will his vouchers vouch him no more of his purchases, and double ones too, than the length and breadth of a pair of indentures? The very conveyances of his lands will hardly lie in this box, and must the inheritor himself have no more? What man dost thou dig it for? For no man, sir. What woman then? For none neither. Who is to be buried in it? One that was a woman, sir, but rest her soul, she's dead. How absolute the knave is. We must speak by the card, or equivocation will undo us. By the Lord, Horatio, these 3 years I have taken a note of it. The age has grown so picked that the toe of the peasant comes so near the heel of the courtier. He gaffs his kibe. How long hast thou been a grave maker? Of all the days of the year, I came to the day that our last King Hamlet overcame Fortinbras. How long is that since? Cannot you tell that? Every fool can tell that. It was the very day that young Hamlet was born, he that is mad and sent into England. Aye, marry, why was he sent into England? Why, because he was mad. He shall recover his wits there, or if he do not, it's no great matter there. Why? 'Twill and not be seen in him there. There the men are as mad as he. How came he mad? Very strangely, they say. How strangely? Faith, even with losing his wits. Here's a skull now. This skull has lain in the earth 23 years. Whose was it? A whoreson mad fellow's it was. Whose do you think it was? Nay, I know not. A pestilence on him for a mad rogue. I poured a flagon of Rhenish on my head once. This same skull, sir, was Yorick's skull, the king's jester. This? In that? Let me see. Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio, a fellow of infinite jest, of most excellent fancy. He hath borne me on his back 1,000 times. And now how abhorred in my imagination it is. My gorge rims at it. Here hung those lips that I have kissed I know not how oft. Where be your jibes now, your gambols, your songs, your flashes of merriment that were wont to set the table in a roar? Not one now to mock your own grinning. Quite chapfallen? Now get you to my lady's chamber and tell her, let her paint an inch thick. To this favour she must come. Make her laugh at that. So I love that last line saying, you can put as much makeup on as you want, but you're going to end up as a skull. It's really funny, I find, but dark humour. And the inevitable justice of the play is Hamlet then killing the king, the usurper king, but dying in his place. Well, sorry, dying as well. Another of the great characters that perhaps doesn't get as much recognition as Hamlet or some of the other main tragedy protagonists is Falstaff. Falstaff is a brilliant, larger than life, quite literally, character from the Henry IV plays. Henry IV Part 1, Part 2, and also Henry V. This is the future King Henry V during the 1400s, early 1400s, and he was Henry IV. He wasn't Henry IV, sorry, he was Prince Hal. He was Prince Henry before being Henry V, sorry. And there's no evidence that he had someone like Falstaff in his life, but it's a lovely counterpart. Falstaff is a brilliant, life-loving but roguish, pretty despicable character who was a friend of Prince Hal's and led him into all kinds of troubles and cheated and made money off wars and was always drunk and making jokes, hanging out with lowlifes. It's kind of this celebration of the faults of man. And it's one of these great characters that I think we can identify with, whether you look at older forms like Laurel and Hardy or more modern forms like Michael Scott in The Office or the original David Brent in English. These characters who do the same things that we do, they potentially make the same mistakes that we do, but they just make so much more of a mess of it and are quite often more unapologetic than we might be. So there's this sense of, they're not heroes, but the beginning of the film, The Big Lebowski, this guy talks about he's a kind of hero. He's not a hero in the sense of Superman or someone doing only good, but he's a hero for our faulty human tendencies towards erring and messing up, that these people, they stand up larger than life for our own inadequacies. And so people enjoy watching it. It's both funny, but also poignant, and they potentially make us feel better about ourselves seeing them. So this is a lovely speech from Falstaff on drink, on sherry sack. Falstaff is a knight, so he's Sir John Falstaff, but he's very drunken. He's basically pretty poor. He makes money any way he can through crime and fraud. And he's just a very despicable, but in a way quite lovable character. And he was one of the favorites of the Shakespearean theatre. People loved watching him on stage, whether he's on stage with Prince Hal or just in a pub by himself. So in that vein, I'm going to have a sip of my beer. A good sherry sack hath a twofold operation in it. It ascends me into the brain, drives me there all the foolish and dull and curdy vapours which environ it, makes it apprehensive, quick, forgettive, full of nimble, fiery, and delectable shapes, which, delivered o'er the voice, the tongue, which is the birth, becomes excellent wit. Ha! The second property of your excellent sherries is this, the warming of the blood, which before cold and settled, left the liver white and pale, which is the badge of pusillanimity and cowardice. But the sherris warms it and makes it course from the inwards to the parts extreme. It illumineth the face, which as a beacon gives warning to all the rest of this little kingdom. Man, to arm! And then the vital commoners and inland petty spirits muster me all to their captain, the heart, who, great and puffed up with this retinue, doth any deed of courage. And this valor comes of sherris. So this image here is of Orson Welles playing Falstaff in one of his films. I forgot the name of the film, sorry. From Act 5, Scene 1, Henry IV, Part 1, when he is about to go into battle with Prince Hal during a rebellion when Prince Hal was trying to seize the throne and then become Henry V. And one of the elements about this section that I chose it for was this interesting part of Shakespeare's characters where often these comedic roles, such as the fool in King Lear, which we'll touch on later, they're not just foolish and stupid and clueless and debaucherous. They also have a kind of salty, drunken insight into human nature, where they are not going to be the good person. And they're going to challenge the things that you're told you should be a good person and do. And in this case, Falstaff is challenging the nature of honor. What is honor when you're meant to go and die in battle for one's country or for one's master? So there's this lovely beginning scene with Falstaff and Henry. The Falstaff says, "Stand over me." And Henry says, "Only a giant could fulfill that," because he's so fat. Anyway. "Hal, if thou see me down in the battle and bestride me, so 'tis a point of friendship. Nothing but a colossus can do thee that friendship. Say thy prayers and farewell. Oh, would 'twere bedtime, Hal, and all well. Why, thou owest God a death. 'Tis not due yet. I would be loath to pay him before his day. What need I be so forward with him that calls not on me? Well, 'tis no matter. Honor pricks me on. Yea, but how if honor pricks me off when I come on? How then? Can honor set to a leg? No. Or an arm? No. Or take away the grief of a wound? No. Honor hath no skill in surgery then? No. What is honor? A word. What is in that word honor? What is that honor? Air, a trim reckoning. Who hath it? He that died Wednesday? Doth he feel it? No. Doth he hear it? No. 'Tis insensible then. Yea, to the dead. But will it not live with the living? No. Why? Detraction will not suffer it. Therefore, I'll none of it. Honor is a mere scutcheon. And so ends my catechism. There's quite a tragic ending to Falstaff's involvement with Prince Hal in the Henry IV plays, is that Falstaff thinks that he's going to be greatly honored when Prince Hal finally becomes Henry V. And he goes to London, and then he's actually rebuked by Henry. And Henry says, "I don't have any more time for you debaucherous criminal types. I'm now of a higher mind. I'm now a king." And so it's the end of this high time, or this golden age of criminality being also innocent, of being fun and drunken and, I guess, in a way playful. So there's some kind of perhaps serious note in this of interest to morality and what it means to become a king and to become political, to turn away this, your old life, your old friends. But actually they have quite a complicated relationship. They're not necessarily purely friends. They kind of fight between them as well. So another tragedy, we will have some comedy stuff as well, is King Lear. It's written in about 1606. Famous tragedy about kingship, the dissolution of a family, of a king, the dissolution of one's own kingdom by bad government, by bad judgment. And it's a play about justice. And one thinks that there may be justice done in the play, but actually there are more often than not very brutal, human, cruel things done to other people, and also to King Lear ultimately himself. And people, this is one of the plays that people couldn't accept 100 years after Shakespeare's life in the Reformation period. they didn't like the ending. You know, the ending is King Lear dying with Cordelia, his daughter, in his arms. King Lear had 3 daughters, in the same way that King James I, who this was performed for, had 3 children. I'll just get there quickly. James I, this was written during James I when he was king. So it's a very topical play about the need of security in a way, and good rulership, good judgment. Cordelia is the one at the beginning of the play who professes her love for her father by saying nothing. She says, I don't need to show my love for you. I love you in duty and I love you as a father. But the 2 other daughters, they say, oh no, I really love you and I want your lands, because he's going to divide his kingdom up into 3 parts for his daughters. And so he throws Cordelia out for not saying enough. The other 2 daughters conspire against King Lear. The whole play is a series of kind of political machinations against King Lear. And in the end, Cordelia, the only one who really loved him, ends up dying in King Lear's arms for no reason. She dies for a now pointless political purpose. And King Lear dies of a broken heart, seeing her dead. There's literally no pickup at the end, but I think it's quite a fascinating play. Sorry, just to go back a bit. So it was probably first performed on the South Bank at the Globe in London, where many of his plays were first performed. This is inside the modern reconstruction of the Globe. But the first recorded instance of King Lear being performed was at the Palace of Whitehall in Westminster, where the Houses of Parliament are now, roughly, in front of King James I here. It's an old story, a lot like I was talking about with Hamlet. There are lots of stories about kings giving land to their kids and then that all going wrong. That's a huge part of English history, is the king giving lands, of course, more often than not to his sons, and everything going wrong. Civil wars arising out of these 2 sons or 3 sons fighting for a bigger share of the land, more greed. This is just an old engraving from an old story from the 12th century about King Lear, L-E-I-R, who was a mythical English king who the same thing happened. So it's a reworking of an older story. So yes, King Lear, the fallen king. So one of the really interesting characters is the fool, as I was mentioning earlier. And a bit like with Falstaff, who did play the fool a lot in a way, the fool was a court institution. It was someone who would entertain the monarch and the court. But often the fool would also be one of the only people who could actually poke fun at the monarch and show them their errs, show them their wrongs, show them that they're being a bit stupid or puffed up or self-important, and could get away with it. Of course, not always, but there are some instances where that was recorded. And the fool does this all the way through the play. And I think very interestingly at the beginning in Act 1, where he completely pokes fun of the fact that King Lear has given away his kingdom with very bad judgment to these 2 daughters and discarded Cordelia. How now, pretty knave, how dost thou? Sirrah, you had best take my coxcomb. Why, fool? Why, for taking one's part that's out of favour. Nay, and thou canst not smile as the wind sits. Thou'lt catch cold shortly. There, take my coxcomb. Why, this fellow has banished 2 on's daughters, and did a 3rd a blessing against his will. If thou follow him, thou must needs wear my coxcomb. How now, uncle? But I had 2 coxcombs and 2 daughters. Why, my boy, if I gave them all my living, I'd keep my coxcombs myself. There's mine. Beg another of thy daughters. Take heed, sirrah, the whip. Truth's a dog must to a kennel. He must be whipped out. When Lady the Brach may stand by the fire and stink. A pestilent girl to me. Sir, I'll teach thee a speech. Do. Mark it, nuncle. Have more than thou showest. Speak less than thou knowest. Lend less than thou owest, ride more than thou goest, learn more than thou trowest, set less than thou throwest, leave thy drink and thy whore, and keep in a door, and thou shalt have more than 2 tens to a score. This is nothing, fool. Then 'tis like the breath of an unfeed lawyer. You gave me nothing for it. Can you make no use of nothing, uncle? Why, no, boy, nothing can be made out of nothing. Prithee, tell him so much the rent of his land comes to. He will not believe a fool. A bitter fool. Dost thou know the difference, my boy, between a bitter fool and a sweet fool? No, lad, teach me. That lord that counselled thee to give away thy land, come place him here by me. Do thou for him stand. The sweet and bitter fool will presently appear. The one in motley here, the other found out there. Dost thou call me a fool, boy? All thy other titles thou hast given away, that thou wast born with. It's brilliant, just picking apart the king. King Lear descends into madness. He is disillusioned by his 2 daughters' treatment of him after they begin to seize more power. So he chose them because he thought they loved him, because they said they loved him. Actually, they don't love him. They think he's a silly old man and they want to get rid of him. And so he goes mad and he goes out into the wilderness with the fool. And he's there in the desolation of nature. And I wanted to finish with King Lear with the final scene, Act 5, Scene 3. King Lear is holding Cordelia, and I find it a very touching moment. One of these moments that people couldn't stand in later centuries because of its apparent meaningless, the lack of justice. He just is about to hear news. He's just heard news that also his fool has been killed. By the way, he still thinks that Cordelia is alive. In his madness, he still thinks that she's breathing. So he dies not knowing whether she's dead or not. But yeah. And my poor fool is hanged. No, no, no life. Why should a dog, a horse, a rat have life, and thou no breath at all? I'll come no more. Never, 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 never. Pray you undo this button. Thank you, sir. Do you see this? Look on her. Look, her lips. Look there. Look there. Oh, 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 oh. I wanted to also include some sonnets in this. Shakespeare wrote these sonnets, published them, I think in the late 1500s or early 1600s, and they are very lovely. There are 150 odd. Don't quote me on that. Sorry, I'm not sure how many there are exactly. Over 100 anyway. So this is sonnet 29. And I used it after King Lear and the death of Cordelia as a sort of a more positive note, if you like, about the, about love and about love. Hopefully you'll get it anyway, just by the sonnet itself. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. Yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising, from sullen earth sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. And on the topic of love, one must of course mention Romeo and Juliet. So written in around 1597, first performed at the theatre, this one of the earliest theatres in London, up in Shoreditch. There's this famous balcony in Verona where the play is set, which is apparently, it's been linked to these two families whose names, I'm sorry, I've forgotten their names, but they're similar to the Capulets and the Montagues. So it's based on real rivalry between two families. You can see all of these notes and padlocks and stuff where all of these lovers have come to pay homage to this balcony, but it's not really known if it's the real the real setting for the play. So part of the depth beneath this apparent love story is more complicated. It's also about how you can be in love or have connections with people who are perhaps not of your same faith. You know, this is a period in history with the Protestant Reformation, this huge schism between Catholics and Protestants, but a huge enmity between them. You know, you would never go out and date a Catholic or get married to a Catholic if you're a Protestant, and vice versa. It talks about love being very beautiful, but also incredibly dangerous and poisonous. The death of both of these characters from this love is obviously a powerful point about that. So this quote, I have two quotes here, both from the balcony scene from Romeo and Juliet from Act 2, Scene 2. And the first is, in a way, quite straightforward. It's just Romeo's, but beautiful lines on looking at a beautiful woman, at Juliet. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief, that thou her maid art far more fair than she. Be not her maid, since she is envious. Her vestal livery is but sick and green, none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. It is my lady, oh, it is my love. Oh, that she knew she were. She speaks, yet she says nothing. What of that? Her eye discourses, I will answer it. Ah, I'm too bold, 'tis not to me she speaks. Two of the fairest stars in all the heaven, having some business, do entreat her eyes to twinkle in their spheres till they return. What if her eyes were there, they in her head? The brightness of her cheek would shame those stars, as daylight doth a lamp. Her eyes in heaven would through the airy region stream so bright that birds would sing and think it were not night. See how she leans her cheek upon her hand. Oh, that I were a glove upon that hand, that I might touch that cheek. And these words from Juliet, also on the balcony. So this is before Romeo and Juliet actually meet. So the speech from Romeo before was her seeing Juliet from afar. And this is her talking about how unfair it is that she seems to be in love with this guy, but he's from a different family. And she just bemoans the fact that it's it's so complicated and it's so unfair that these different factions dictate who you can fall in love with. So it's in a way not unfitting that I would do a female character, because in Shakespeare's day, the roles for women, they were performed by men, usually younger men who had higher voices. I'm not sure when the first female characters were actually ever employed in Shakespeare, but certainly in Shakespeare's time, they would have just been men performing the women's roles. "'Tis but thy name that is my enemy. Thou art thyself, though not a Montague." What's Montague? It is nor hand, nor foot, nor arm, nor face, nor any other part belonging to a man. Oh, be some other name. What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. So Romeo would, were he not Romeo called, retain that dear perfection which he owes without that title. Romeo, doff thy name, and for that name which is no part of thee, take all myself. I would find it very interesting to research more about the beginnings of Romanticism and this whole sense of, this whole romantic movement of chasing someone and falling in love, and how much it really comes from Romeo and Juliet, or if it's, I'm sure it's much more complicated than that. But I think this play had quite a big effect on the more nuanced aspect where both parties are involved, where the woman also can be actively falling in love and choosing her partner and wanting particular people, something more genuine outside of family arranged marriages, which was very much the norm at the time, or people who were fitting for you. And another sonnet here, which is a slightly more nuanced view of a relationship. So in Shakespeare's sonnets, he addresses these sonnets to two people. One seems to be a man and one seems to be a woman. We're not sure who these people are that he's addressing it to. But I like this sonnet. It's much more of a real interior of a relationship. And I just chose this quite stiff, very intriguing photo from Jan van Eyck, this famous Arnolfini portrait. "And my love swears that she is made of truth. I do believe her, though I know she lies. That she might think me some untutored youth, unlearned in the world's full subtleties. Thus vainly thinking that she thinks me young, although she knows my days are past the best. Simply, I credit her false speaking tongue. On both sides thus is simple truth suppressed. But wherefore says she not she is unjust? And wherefore say not I that I am old? Oh, love's best habit is in seeming trust, and age in love loves not to have years told. Therefore I lie with her and she with me, and in our faults by lies we flattered be." So, a comedy. Although the section I'm choosing is not comedic as such, laugh out loud, but I chose the character of Rosalind, who's one of the most famous and nuanced and developed of the female characters, who again would have been played by a man in Shakespeare's time. As You Like It is a play about love. It's also a play about the court life versus the country life, but it's largely about love. A lot of these romantic pastoral comedies are about love. They're early rom-coms. And yeah, so this play is set in France, and due to certain political reasons, Rosalind, who is part of the court. She leaves into the forest with one of her maids, Celia. In order to disguise herself, she dresses up as a man, and she then starts to pursue the love interests of Orlando, who is dressed up as himself, as a man, and then she approaches him as a man called Ganymede and tries to woo him by acting as a friend to Orlando in how to prove his love, if you like, for Rosalind, who he is interested in. But she wants him to prove that he really likes her. And it's an interesting reversal of characters, because usually in Shakespearean times and before, it's the man who is actively trying to get the women. You didn't really have this kind of normal, as we would today see it, where both people are actively doing it. So this character of a woman who's embodying the role of a man and then actively pursuing this man and having interesting things to say about it is quite new for the time. And of course, a lot more can be said. It's a lot more nuanced, but for time-wise, I was just going to read this scene out. An interesting aspect of the scene is that this is a male actor playing a woman originally, and then dressing up, pretending to be a man. So there's also very interesting aspects about gender. Back in the day, it was much more two-way. There was male and female. Not today's argument, not today's discussions of gender, perhaps, but again, interesting for the time. So this is a Victorian painting of Rosalind dressed up as Ganymede. So she approaches Orlando in the forest, and Orlando thinks that Rosalind is a man. And this is how the scene goes. This is from Act 3, Scene 1. By the way, Orlando has been leaving notes, one of these notes that Rosalind's holding, leaving notes all over the forest, declaring his love for Rosalind. And Rosalind is seeing him. And then this is how the story picks up. I swear to thee, youth, by the white hand of Rosalind, I am that he, that unfortunate he. But are you so much in love as your rhymes speak? Neither rhyme nor reason can express how much. Love is merely a madness, and I tell you, deserves as well a dark house and a whip as madmen do. And the reason why they are not so punished and cured is that the lunacy is so ordinary that the whippers are in love too. Yet I profess curing it by counsel. Did you ever cure any so? Yes, one, and in this manner. He was to imagine me, his love, his mistress, and I set him every day to woo me, at which time would I, being but a moonish youth, grieve, be effeminate, changeable, longing and liking, proud, fantastical, apish, shallow, inconstant, full of tears, full of smiles, for every passion something, and for no passion truly anything, as boys and women are for the most part cattle of this colour. Would now like him, now loathe him, then entertain him, then forswear him, now weep for him, then spit at him. That I drove my suitor from his mad humour of love to a living humour of madness, which was to forswear the full stream of the world and to look in a nook merely monastic. And thus I cured him. And this way will I take upon me to wash your liver as clean as a sound sheep's heart, that there shall not be one spot of love in it. I would not be cured, youth. I would cure you, if you would but call me Rosalind, and come every day to my cote and woo me. So it's a very interesting reversal of character, and also challenging this foppish, courtly love where the man is pining head over heels in love for the woman. And she's basically saying, is this really true, or is this just a kind of show, a kind of madness? They do end up getting together. Orlando proves to be truly in love with her, and then they end up getting married. So the last reading here is also from As You Like It, and it's from Act 2, Scene 7, with this character Jacques, who used to be a courtier in the French court, but was banished, and he's really very melancholic. He distrusts the machinations of politics and the court. He thinks life is a bit of a drag and a bit pointless and just leading to death. And all we do is play these various roles along the way, like a theatre performance. There's no real point in it. So this is this very famous speech. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. First the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy, with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like a furnace, with a woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths and bearded like the pod, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly, with good capon lined, with eyes severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances. And so he plays his part. The 6th age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side. His youthful hose well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice turning again toward childish treble pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all, that ends this strange, eventful history, is second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. So thank you very much for joining. I really hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it.
It was awesome. So Edward, I know you were busy doing the presentation. You couldn't see the comments, but a number of people, myself included, were commenting on the fabulous job you did, not only with the reading, but matching it up with the artwork. It was really well done in terms of you perfectly matched up the readings with the artwork. So good job on that.
Thank you very much.
So let's see if anyone has any questions, feel free to chime it in. So I was telling people also, I posted your meetup group and I'll email that as well. We recorded the Shakespeare program. If the recording was successful, I'll email that as well. And then we're having the, Edward's going to do a reading of Van Gogh's letters 2 weeks from today. And I'll email that also as well. That's not on our calendar yet. I just haven't had a chance to put it on there, but I'll do so probably tomorrow. And then I'll email that out if you want to come learn more about Vincent van Gogh and his letters. We will check that out.
Yeah.
But yeah, really, it was really interesting looking at the paintings while you were doing the readings. I really enjoyed that a lot. And I could tell a number of other people from the comments were saying the same thing, like, oh, wow, that's a beautiful painting. And some people are actually asking what the names of some of the artworks were. Really awesome.
Right.
So Leona wants to know, are you a Shakespearean actor?
No, I did play in some plays when I was younger. I'm 33 now, so I'm not that old. But no, I'm not a Shakespearean actor. I like it. I like just involving myself in different roles. I find it a very lovely, kind of cathartic, mystical thing that happens when I can just slip into these characters, and however well it is, but I like doing it. I really like doing it.
Yeah, it was really moving. I really enjoyed it a lot, and I could tell the other people did as well. It's really
Wow.
really fascinating. What was the so at the end of the presentation that we did earlier, there was the guy Don, he asked about something about like the translating, like was Shakespeare made easy or something like that. What was that?
So
name
there's a
of that
website.
again?
If you type in "No Fear Shakespeare," then it's designed to help students of Shakespeare, and it's got his texts. You might have to look a bit for the actual text within that website. I think it's part of Spark Notes, and then it has the text next to it in a kind of modern English, which is obviously really, really helpful.
So I'll post that now. That sounded like a helpful source for people.
Someone else asks, what do you think of Upstart Crow? Yeah, I like it. I think it's great. There's also a great comedy called Bill. I think it's just called Bill, an English sort of comedy about Shakespeare's life, which is really funny. Yeah.
What about, are there any particular film renditions of Shakespeare's works that you like best? You mentioned a couple of them in your talk, but any particular ones that you think are the most well done, or the ones that you recommend the most?
Oh, I really like, I think it's Mancini's Romeo and Juliet. I think it's Mancini, sorry, I think it's from the 60s or 70s.
Okay.
An Italian version of Romeo and Juliet. But yeah.
You said that was her favorite movie. And then someone asked Ingrid about, what about Shakespeare in Love? Yes, Henry Mancini, Ken Rhodes said.
Well, yeah, Shakespeare in Love has an amazing scene towards the end of the Romeo and Juliet ending, where Gwyneth Paltrow kills herself. Well, not not as the actress, of course, and as Juliet. And there's this moment when she finishes talking her line, when the whole of the Globe Theatre is completely still, and all of these people are just standing there. And then there's this applause. I found that a great moment for showing the effect that some of these scenes must have had, or potentially could have had, and also just setting the scene for what it would have been like to watch a play at the Globe back in the day. So I think that was a really nice scene. I mean, Shakespeare in Love, yeah, it's kind of, I think it's a bit Hollywoodized, but yeah, I liked it.
So myself, I've been working on this program. I'm going to call it the Holocaust in Popular Culture Films, and we're going to basically show clips from different Holocaust films. Like most people are familiar with Schindler's List and a few other ones, but there's a lot of Holocaust films that are very good that people might not be familiar with. And so I was going to do this program where I was going to basically like play a clip and then talk about it. You probably do the same thing for Shakespeare, just because he's so well known, and people on these programs are usually looking for like more opportunities to learn about different things. Let's see.
Right.
Has the book
Richard III with Ian Mckellen was very, very good as well. I've watched a couple of plays live in theatre. One of them with Ben Whishaw playing Hamlet. I mean, that was absolutely fantastic. And also a version of Othello with Anthony, I've forgotten his name. Sorry for swearing. Yeah, I've forgotten his name, but it was brilliant. Anthony, what's his name? Anthony Shaw. He's a really famous English Shakespearean actor. Anyway, it's really good. I think it's televised as well. Yeah, not Anthony Hopkins. Anthony Sher.
Jackie said you should consider a career in acting.
Well, I'm doing it right now, and of course, we're all acting on some level anyway. So, no, I'm kidding. Thank you for that comment. Anyway,
what about Barbara asked, do you recommend a particular book of Shakespeare's famous quotations? I've been looking for one.
Well, yes. 1 second. Rene did he mean the Zeffirelli version? Yes, I did. Zeffirelli's version of Romeo and Juliet. No, I saw that comment about Shakespeare's book. I just have lots of different books. I don't have one or found one that is a kind of collection of his stuff. Sorry, I can't help you there, really.
Barbara, there's a famous, if you can't find that particular Shakespeare book, there's a famous quote by Toni Morrison. I don't remember the exact verbiage, but it has something to do along the lines of, if there's a book you're looking for and you can't find it, then you must write it yourself. So yeah, right, maybe such a thing doesn't exist, but you should put one together.
Yeah. Patricia, what is Ed's profession? Well, I do these tours full time. I do a couple of tours a week to some people online each time.
That's a professional tour guide. So what we're going to do is when COVID ends, we're going to go fly over to London on a group trip and have Ed show us all this cool Shakespeare and other stuff in London.
Right. Yeah.
I think is the best modern Shakespeare actor today, asked David. I vote for Edward.
Wow, how nice. How nice.
Anthony Hopkins, Kate chimed in, Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah, that was about my Anthony Sher comment. So yeah.
Yes, I'll email the Vincent van Gogh stuff.
Oh, this painting in the background someone was asking about is called the Passing of the Bull. It's by an English artist called Michael Kimming, I think. Yeah, it's a bullfight. Yeah, there you go. Just quickly, a little bit of admin. I'm just going to put my
can you tell about
my PayPal address in the chat, just in case anyone wants to make a very welcome donation. No pressure.
And then you can also tell people about your meetup group, please.
Yeah. Maybe you could you link that again there if you have it to hand, Robert? I just have PayPal. Sorry, I don't have other payment things, but I didn't really know what else to do. Anyway, so there's that. But this email also functions as my personal email, so you're very welcome to write to me and to say hi or whatever. So yeah, I have a meetup group where I do my different tours about all different things, a lot of history of art, a lot of things about London and English history as well. Or museums.
The meetup group.
There you go. There's the meetup group. And yeah, so that's the meetup group in the link there. And it's a lot smaller, as in every week it's maybe 20 people joining every Wednesday evening, 6 p.m. Well, sorry, this is UK time. So 1 p.m. Washington time on a Wednesday and 11 a.m. on a Saturday. I do these tours. And so it's a smaller amount of people, and I can see all of you with your little faces on the screen, and then we have a chat before and afterwards. So it's more kind of interactive.
Yeah, unfortunately for these programs, we draw hundreds of people, and we frequently have people trying to disrupt what we're doing and Zoom bomb us with racist, sexist, political stuff. So we have to have security measures in place, unfortunately, because of some of the past things that people have tried to do to us. So
right,
the one downside of this kind of format.
Yeah, like read to you things from Shakespeare. I mean, God, who wants to hear that? Jesus.
There's a lot of
I've actually interrupted Robert's talk for a whole hour. I've just completely Shakespeare bombed the whole thing.
And then I posted the meetup group on the Facebook. So we're streaming this live on Facebook also, and I posted it on there as well.
All right. Thank you, Ina. Very grateful for your 2 tours today. Yes, Maribel, you need to come to England and do the tour in person.
Yes.
Yes, he had 2 other children. So Hamlet died, I think, at about the age of 10 or 11. He had 2 other kids, one with Judith and the other one, I'm sorry, I've forgotten their name. And I don't know much about them. I don't know much about how his family survived after he died. But he had 3 kids in total. I'm sorry, I'm not so good on that part of it.
Who are some of your other favorite authors?
Susanna and Judith. Oh, yeah. Sorry, what?
Who are some of your other favorite authors?
Ooh, I really like John Fowles. John Fowles, who did The Magus, the French Lieutenant's Daughter. I find him really beguiling. On a lighter note, I love Terry Pratchett, amazing science fiction and sort of brilliant works from Terry Pratchett. Gosh, loads. I mean, loads of people I like to read, and there are tons and tons of brilliant authors. But John Fowles, I think John Fowles had a huge effect on me. It's prose.
Someone Kathy asks, are there any known living descendants of Shakespeare?
Good question. Actually, that's something that someone asked earlier today, and I kind of meant to look it up, but I didn't. So I don't know. Good question, though. Oh, the one before Terry Pratchett. I'll write it in here. I hope I get the spelling right. Right, John Fowles. And a book I loved was called The Magus. Yeah. And I liked Anonymous, the film. Someone asked. I liked Anonymous. Yes.
I know you're based in London, but it was interesting. No one asked who do you thought was going to win the Super Bowl? Because people in the US are preoccupied with the Super Bowl today.
One second. I'm just writing my address down again. I'm putting it in the chat now. I did it.
So our friend David, he's really smart. He knows a lot of stuff, and he says that Shakespeare has no living descendants. Thank you, David. Appreciate that.
Okay, great. Thanks, David.
If it comes from him, you can be certain it's 100% factual.
Yeah.
Thanks, David. Appreciate that.
And Helen, I have actually written 2 little books myself. Well, I've written 3 books actually, but one of them is a poetry book. If you're interested in any of the books I've published, just feel free to email me, and you can just say book in the subject. You don't have to write me a whole email, and I can reply to you. They're all online, basic ebook format.
What are the topics and whatnot?
Well, I published a poetry book, so if you want to read some of my own poetry, then I have one of those, which is actually a physical book. So Amazon, it's print on demand. Amazon will just send it out to you with pictures and my poems. And then the other 2 are about different aspects of London's history, but they're like a tour that you can do. You can walk around London with this little guide. So it's meant to go along with one of my tours that I actually did in person. But it's interesting for the history anyway. It's like a very compact, condensed history of different aspects of London. What time is the online tour in London? So it's for Washington. So, okay, UK time, it's 6 p.m. on a Wednesday evening and 4 p.m. on a Saturday. But as far as I'm aware, Robert will again send an email with my information, with the links to my meetup group, for example.
Yeah, I'll email that all, but I won't be able to do it till tomorrow. So if you
fine.
No, someone will send me an email in 10 minutes saying, where's the email you were going to send?
Yeah.
So I'll send that out tomorrow.
Can you recommend a history of London? Yes, if you have the time, then Peter Ackroyd's book, London, the Biography, is massive, but it's literally everything in a way. He goes into so much depth about it. Another would be, I'll write it in here. I'll write the author, and then you can just type in. So Peter Ackroyd's book on London, and also a book by a guy called Edward Rutherford called London. And this is in a way better in a sense for me, because it's historical fiction. So it takes you through the history of London, following different families. So that part is fiction about the families, but it's real, set in the real history of London, and it's really, really, really good.
Asked if you play the guitar.
Wait, sorry, Sharon. Sharon said she didn't have a question answered. Sharon, what's your question?
Yeah, sorry, Sharon. There's like 500 people on here, and so we've had quite a few.
Yeah, sorry, we can't answer everything. I'm trying. Sharon, go ahead and ask.
Yeah, Sharon, ask your question again in the chat.
In the meantime, Paulette, yes, I do play the guitar. Definitely not well, but I do like to strum sometimes, especially if I'm feeling sad. I get the guitar out and speak to it. The poor thing. I think any of Peter Ackroyd's books are worth a read, Renee. They're pretty heavy, but they're definitely worth a read. So Sharon, has the book Hamlet increased interest in Shakespeare? The book Hamlet. Maybe I'm being really stupid here. What is that? Sorry. Oh, by Maggie O'Farrell. I don't know. That's a good question. I haven't read the book. I assume that's the one that you meant, published this year, I think. I don't know, but sorry, Sharon, I don't know, but good question. I haven't read the book myself, so yeah. And I'm not that involved in, you know, all the latest news about Shakespeare, to be quite honest. But thanks for asking, Sharon. Sorry we didn't answer you earlier. Sharon, yes, big seller, good read. Ah, thank you. It's called Hamnet, Hamnet, by Maggie O'Farrell, about Hamlet's son, Hamlet. Patricia, when in London, will your tours be strictly a walking tour or also by bus? Well, it'll be a walking tour, but it's not strict. So we have taken public transport to get to other places if it's a bigger tour, but usually I do 2 hours and I like to go quite in depth. So we just tend to walk around a walkable area in those 2 hours. What was your second book recommendation about London? Well, I put it in the chat. It's called London, ta-da, by Edward Rutherford. I'll write it again here. Yeah. Which part of London history is your speciality? David, probably the city. So the central kind of historical core of London, the city of London, or Westminster. So the history of government and that area. But essentially the city of London, I did a lot of work on that.
How did you get started giving tours of London?
How did I get started?
Yeah, Karen asked.
I actually saw a book in an apartment where I was staying in London. I had just moved to London. This is like 3 years ago. And I saw a book, How to Read London by Its Architecture. And I immediately had this feeling like I want to now learn about stuff and teach it, because I'd always been a kind of teacher in different jobs and I'd always been interested in learning stuff, but I never had the kind of teaching job where I could actually share the things that I had learned. I was teaching within a curriculum. And so suddenly it made just an enormous amount of sense. And it was all clear, like floodgates opening, that this is just the most effortless thing for me to do. And I'll probably always have a kind of passion for it. So it seems I'll just start giving tours, and it kind of picked up from there. Does Edward speak French? Oui, je peux parler français, mais seulement peu, c'est difficile. Mais je peux faire un dialogue, une conversation avec, avec quelqu'un, assez facile. Yeah, a little bit of showing off there. Which football club are you a supporter of? I don't support football, sorry. Not interested. Well, I moved to London 3 years ago to actually live there, but I spent a long time there. This is from Ina. I lived in and around London my whole life. I just moved away in my 20s and lived abroad and stuff and did all kinds of different things and then came back. But my interest was always in the history of London. It's just that when I then moved to London, it became much more sort of immediate.
Well, let's do this. Let's wrap things up because I have another project I have to go jump on. So again, thanks everyone for being here, and a special thanks to Edward for that awesome presentation. That was fabulous.
You're very welcome.
And again, I'll send out an email with more information on the Van Gogh stuff, and I'll track down Edward's books and put the information there as well, and then his email and stuff. But I won't.
Yeah, we can liaise about that, Robert, if you want. Yeah.
But again, I won't be able to do that till tomorrow. So.
All right. Well,
awesome. Well,
I'll see you on this platform, guys, in 2 weeks. But if you want to join my meetup group, I'll see you on Wednesday. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your weekend. Take care. Stay safe.
Bye. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.